A man was playing in the swimming pool with his girlfriend. Suddenly, a strange creature appeared in the pool. The girlfriend heard a noise and quickly went outside to check, but her boyfriend was nowhere to be found in the venue. She was puzzled. However, this wasn't the first time an unknown creature had attacked humans. A while ago, the girl also encountered something strange on the subway. She felt extremely hot. When she turned her head, she saw a giant spider. But this giant spider wasn't the only one. Today, let's take a look at a mind-bending sci-fi British series. Wormholes randomly appear anywhere in time and space, bringing back many prehistoric creatures. Fierce saber-tooths, aerial predators like pterosaurs, and even mutated creatures invading from the future. Only one woman understands these wormholes, but she has been missing for years. One night, an unknown creature chased the woman into the city. It had immense strength and wreaked havoc everywhere. The next day, student Connor found Professor Nick to discuss a photo of the monster in the newspaper. The professor also found it strange. Recently, many unknown creatures had suddenly appeared. The group prepared to investigate the location, recorded in the newspaper. There, they encountered Agent Brown. The group saw torn railings and severely damaged trucks. This reminded Nick of some past events. 8 years ago, his wife Helen went missing nearby. At that time, there were also signs of a suspected monster, and Helen was the woman who had been chased by the unknown creature. Amy loved lizards very much. However, the zoo director approached her to say that the lizard exhibit was closing. Amy was angry but felt helpless, but she noticed the file in the director's hand. The boy Ben had discovered a new species that looked very much like a lizard. Amy decided to visit him. Under his guidance, she went to the forest, but soon they got separated. She didn't expect that this green lizard could fly. It seemed to be some kind of flying dragon. Suddenly, Ben noticed a strange sight. He leaned in to find a completely different world inside, and there were many flying dragons. At this moment, a noise suddenly came from around. The monster had come nearby again. Ben hurried home, but the monster followed him back home. Fortunately, Ben reacted quickly. He threw a plasma ball at the monster and successfully drove it back. Meanwhile, Amy was still wandering in the forest. A huge unknown creature appeared beside her. At this moment, Nick and the others arrived. They noted that it looked very much like an ancient turtle, and they also saw the little flying dragons. Everyone was quite bewildered. Soon, Brown and his team arrived at Ben's house. Ben told them that he had just witnessed a prehistoric scene. Although everyone found it hard to believe, the recent events made them take it seriously. The group returned to the forest again, and, led by the ancient turtle, found the glowing orb. The ancient turtle directly burrowed into it and disappeared. The experts analyzed the orb and found it had strong magnetism and was connected to ancient Earth. It appeared to be a wormhole. Nick speculated that Helen might have gone missing after accidentally entering the wormhole. After a while, the group found some footprints in the forest. They looked very much like the tracks of prehistoric predatory dinosaurs. If left unchecked, it could pose significant dangers. Meanwhile, Ben was being punished by his teacher. The dinosaur had found its way here. It seemed to have a special interest in Ben. Fortunately, Brown arrived just in time to attract the dinosaur's attention and retaliated with a fire extinguisher. Meanwhile, Nick and the others were guarding the wormhole. They were preparing to send the flying dragon back to the past and explore the other side. Soon, everything was ready. Nick entered the glowing orb holding the flying dragon. He arrived on Earth billions of years ago. However, the others outside the orb suddenly noticed the magnetic field weakening. It seemed the wormhole was starting to become unstable. Nick was unaware of this and was excitedly exploring the prehistoric world. Dinosaurs were everywhere in sight. Suddenly, a soldier called him over. They had discovered human equipment. It seemed someone had arrived here before them. Then they spotted a human skeleton nearby. However, the deceased was a man, so Nick planned to search the area for Helen. But the soldier insisted they must return. Seeing that Nick was unyielding, he knocked him out. Then he carried him toward the wormhole. Upon returning, they found the wormhole was disappearing. Nick didn't want to leave, but the soldier said, "If you don't leave, I won't either." With no other choice, Nick had to follow him back. Moreover, the flying dragon also returned. In the next moment, the wormhole vanished. Nick told everyone about everything he had seen inside. At this moment, the predatory dinosaur reappeared. Fortunately, Brown drove up and knocked it out with his car. The crisis was temporarily resolved. The group formed a special task force to specifically investigate the abnormal wormhole phenomena. They spent a period of calm days afterward. Meanwhile, deep in the city, a woman suddenly felt very hot while riding the subway, and it seemed something was moving it. The woman turned her head to check. Relevant authorities sent experts to disinfect the tunnel. However, they didn't notice a spider appearing behind them. It swiftly devoured a rat in one bite. After the disinfection was completed, the expert was preparing to leave. Suddenly, he found a hole in the wall next to him. For safety, the expert decided to check it out. Just as he turned back, he was attacked by the spider. The expert was sent to the hospital. The toxin had invaded his internal organs. The doctors were powerless to save him. Seeing how vicious the unknown creature was, the military immediately went to the scene of the incident. They then arrived at an underground emergency shelter. The soldiers scanned their surroundings with night vision goggles. A giant spider came into view. The captain quickly ordered to capture it alive for study. However, the spider was incredibly fast, and it disappeared in no time. At this moment, strange noises came from the ceiling. Unexpectedly, there were giant spiders all over the ceiling. They descended and attacked the soldiers. The soldiers, panicked by the bites, attempted to shoot the spiders. However, this was a shelter. The surroundings were all made of hard concrete. But the gunfire scared away all the spiders. The team quickly evacuated the tunnel. Once outside, the captain noted that the oxygen levels in the shelter were extremely high. This was due to the bright sparks from bullets fired inside. Nick speculated that the wormhole was somewhere in the shelter. Perhaps prehistoric oxygen had high purity and was released into shelters through wormholes. To clarify the situation, Nick decided to personally investigate the shelter. They used the spider's fear of bright light to drive them away as they advanced deeper. After passing through a wire mesh destroyed by spiders, they finally discovered the wormhole. Just as the three were observing, a large number of spiders rushed into the wormhole. At this moment, Amy was so frightened that she dropped her flashlight. As she bent down to pick it up, she saw a terrifying scene. A several-meter-long giant centipede charged toward them. It wasn't afraid of the bright light, and was extremely agile. In a critical moment, Nick picked up a box and threw it at the centipede. This temporarily drove it back. The group nervously shone their flashlights around. Suddenly, the centipede attacked from the ceiling. Brown grabbed a basket and hurled it at the centipede. He took Xiaomei and ducked into a nearby room. The centipede then turned its attention to Nick. Fortunately, he quickly hid behind an iron door. After the centipede left, Nick saw a shadow ahead, but there was no one else around. He hurriedly chased after it, but the end was a dead end. He saw no signs of any creature, so he began to suspect that he had hallucinations. Meanwhile, the two who had escaped were in a panic. Nick was trapped, and they needed to rescue him quickly. But the giant centipede was incredibly fierce. To defeat it, they needed to know both themselves and the enemy. However, they didn't know the weaknesses of centipedes. From billions of years ago, Brown didn't care about that. He took a flamethrower and re-entered the underground. Soon, he came face to face with the giant centipede. The centipede did seem to fear the flames somewhat, but as Brown ventured deeper, the flamethrower was pulled into the wormhole. At this moment, the centipede let out an eerie laugh. It seemed to possess a certain level of intelligence. Brown was stung and collapsed, struggling in pain. In his daze, he seemed to see a woman approaching. She spoke a few words to him. At this moment, Nick returned to the scene. Seeing Brown on the ground, he rushed to get him out. Brown then mentioned that his wife had been here. He also said she would be waiting for Nick on the other side of the wormhole. Before long, Connor arrived on the scene. He immediately recognized that the centipede-like creature was an ancient millipede. Connor added that although it was huge, it was actually quite timid. Its eyesight was nearly non-existent, but its sense of touch and smell was exceptionally keen. Most importantly, it was completely non-venomous. However, since they didn't have a sample of the venom, the doctors were helpless against this toxin. Once the toxin invaded the nervous system, it would be too late, so Nick stated that he had a way to obtain a sample. He quickly gathered some equipment. The group re-entered the underground, but after searching around, they found no sign of the centipede. Nick could only pray that it hadn't escaped back to the other side of the wormhole. At this moment, Connor mentioned that this creature had a habit of burrowing, so the group carefully checked the ground and walls. Soon, they indeed found a large hole. They passed through and arrived at a factory. Sure enough, the centipede was hiding here. Nick quickly approached to provoke it, and actively extended his arm to resist, when the centipede attacked. After that, the soldier quickly shot at the centipede, but it didn't cause any significant damage. At this moment, Connor threw a stool, and successfully got stuck in the centipede's mouthparts. It thrashed its head back and forth. It retreated into a nearby electrical box. After neutralizing this threat, Nick rolled up his sleeve. It turned out he had a collection device strapped to his arm. He successfully obtained a sample to create an antidote. Brown was also out of danger. The group happily celebrated their victory. However, there was no progress in their research on the wormhole. They could only wait for the next wormhole to appear. After a few days of waiting, the anomalies began again. A man was practicing diving at the swimming pool with his girlfriend. The woman heard a scream in the changing room. She rushed outside to check, but she didn't see her boyfriend anywhere. Suddenly, a crocodile burst through the glass of the pool. It startled the woman greatly. Soon, the team members arrived at the scene. The police informed them that the woman said there was a water monster in the pool, and it ate her boyfriend. The police didn't believe such nonsense. Instead, they thought the woman had killed her boyfriend. But Nick stated that the man was killed by an ancient creature. He mentioned that he had taken over the case. Then they needed to investigate before the wormhole closed. After some time, a mass of flesh floated up in an artificial lake 30 kilometers away. Genetic testing revealed that it was the man who had gone missing in the pool. Nick speculated that the wormhole had become unstable. It might keep moving constantly. The military immediately sealed off the artificial lake and launched an investigation. Connor noticed that the water level was dropping. Nick believed the wormhole might be underwater and was transporting water to prehistoric Earth. Suddenly, Nick noticed a large area of steam on the lake's surface. This was due to evaporation caused by the temperature difference in the water. The steam indicated the location of the wormhole. He quickly took the soldiers into the water to check. Sure enough, shortly after entering the water, they discovered the wormhole. Meanwhile, Connor and Amy were collecting samples in the lake. Suddenly, they noticed that the geese in the lake had flown away. Then a shadow was approaching them. The two dared not move. They waited until the crocodile swam away, before they hurriedly ran toward the shore. However, the crocodile had extremely sharp hearing. It turned around and charged at them. Fortunately, the crocodile couldn't get onto the shore. Connor took out the oars and inserted it into its mouth, successfully repelling it. It returned to the water and headed straight for the wormhole. But a soldier was also taken in, because he was too close to the wormhole. At this moment, the wormhole disappeared after the soldier passed through. Connor speculated that the creature was a Plesiosaur from the Cretaceous period, and it was a juvenile. After returning to the research facility, Nick stated that the fourth dimension truly exists. The wormhole was like a massive earthquake in spacetime that tore apart the time dimension. He also speculated on the possible locations where the wormhole might appear. Before long, strange things happened again. A woman picked up a backpack to take her child to school. Suddenly, she noticed that her shoes had left some watermarks. She hurried to the basement to check, and found that it was already flooded. Thinking it was a burst pipe, she called a repairman. However, as soon as he entered the water, he noticed that there seemed to be something down there, so he turned on his flashlight to look around. When the woman heard a noise and came down to check, the repairman was pulled into the water. Soon, the team members arrived on the scene. They unexpectedly found the soldier, who had gone missing in the lake. A handkerchief was tied around his arm, with symbols that only Nick could understand. Obviously, his wife had been living in the prehistoric world. At this moment, the project leader Mitch arrived. He felt that Helen had lived on prehistoric Earth for many years, and must possess invaluable knowledge and information, so he demanded that Nick enter the wormhole to bring Helen back. Otherwise, he would revoke Nick's participation in the project. Military personnel would also be dispatched to capture Helen. Nick had to agree. Soon, he entered the wormhole carrying an oxygen tank and a tether. They had agreed on a time, regardless of success or failure. When the time was up, they would pull George back. After entering the wormhole, he quickly swam to the shore. The scenery here was particularly beautiful. It was like a fairyland. He searched around, and soon found Helen swimming. After many years, the two met again, but it felt like meeting a familiar stranger. Nick urged her to return to modern society. However, Helen hoped he would stay here and enjoy this paradise with her. Then Helen mentioned that there were countless wormholes in this area. Moreover, she had found a way to open them. Nick believed that the wormholes would bring catastrophic disasters to humanity. He didn't want to head toward such a fate. However, Helen thought humanity was beyond saving long ago. The two got into a heated argument. Nick turned around and walked away, but on his way back, he was attacked by a plesiosaur. The oxygen tube was bitten through, just as he was about to be swallowed by the creature. A larger plesiosaur swallowed it whole. However, Nick fainted due to lack of oxygen. Fortunately, the agreed-upon time arrived. The people on the other side quickly pulled the tether back. They then quickly began emergency rescue efforts, and successfully pulled him back from the edge of death. Mitch's assistant Tina hurriedly asked if Helen had been seen. Upon receiving a positive response, she immediately ordered the military to go in and capture her. When Nick fully regained consciousness, he was confronted by soldiers with guns drawn. He looked completely bewildered. At this moment, his wife was also brought back by the soldiers. They looked at Nick, thinking he had betrayed her. Next, the military planned to find a breakthrough through Helen. However, she had no intention of revealing any information to the military, but out of respect for her many years of marriage to Nick, she revealed that a wormhole would appear soon, and also mentioned that a large number of saber-toothed tigers would come to the streets of London. Although they were skeptical, they had to let Helen guide them to the city center. She indicated that the wormhole would appear in a dining center. When they arrived at the destination, Helen opened the oven door and stated that the aroma of the food would attract ancient creatures, so everyone hurried to move the food. Meanwhile, Helen seized the opportunity to rush into the wormhole. While everyone was busy, the soldiers in brown quickly followed in pursuit, but once inside, they discovered there were countless wormholes. They had no idea where to chase after her. Meanwhile, on the other side, the group was discussing their strategy. Suddenly, a noise came from the wormhole. All the soldiers quickly went on alert. They expected it to be a fierce beast, but it turned out to be a flock of ducklings. They gathered the ducklings into a room. Amy said these were dodos from 20 million years ago. They hurriedly sent the birds back through the wormhole, but they found that one had already died. To understand the cause, they brought the corpse back. Meanwhile, outside the dining center, two people were sneaking around. They were Connor's friends. Having noticed that Connor hadn't shown up recently, they hid a tracker in a pendant and gave it to him. But coincidentally, the pendant was swallowed by an escaping bird. They thought they were tracking Connor, but unexpectedly, they saw a dodo instead. They caught the bird and prepared to keep it for themselves. Unbeknownst to them, danger was approaching. They placed the dodo in the living room and let it roam around freely, but gradually, the dodo's behavior became unusually aggressive. It even bit Nolan's hand. However, the two didn't pay much attention to it. They thought it was just a minor bite. But soon, Nolan's condition began to deteriorate. He had a splitting headache and his eyes turned blue. Nolan also became extremely aggressive. The fat guy saw that the situation wasn't good and ran out. He found Connor and informed him of the situation. Meanwhile, Nick was studying the dead dodo. Suddenly, the corpse twitched. A worm fell out from inside. Nick stated that it was a prehistoric parasite. It would consume the host's internal organs and attack the nervous system to control the host. Its sole purpose was to reproduce. Once a new individual was born, the parasite would die along with the host. Meanwhile, Connor learned of the situation and surrounded Nolan's house with his team. However, upon entering, they found no sign of Nolan. Only the corpse of the dodo remained. Nolan was now extremely dangerous, essentially a moving pathogen. At this moment, he had arrived at the hospital. Nolan was in pain all over and kept coughing. It was clear that the parasite was consuming his internal organs. A doctor came over to examine him. Unexpectedly, Nolan suddenly bit the doctor. Then he escaped from the hospital. He ran into Amy and lunged at her. Just as Nolan was about to bite her, Nick and his team arrived just in time. As they were about to shoot, Connor suddenly jumped out. He wanted to awaken Nolan's reason. Although he managed to wake him up and let Amy go, but Nolan's internal organs had essentially been consumed completely. He died in Connor's arms shortly after. The seemingly harmless dodo brought such a significant threat. Fortunately, it didn't spread further. Meanwhile, a man was playing golf. Suddenly, a giant bird appeared in the sky. Terrified, the man took off running. Suddenly, he was lifted off the ground. By the time his friends arrived, the man was already dead, and he was left with nothing but a skeleton. At this moment, Connor had not yet recovered from Nolan's death. He could only numb himself by playing video games. Nick rushed to the scene to inspect the body. and immediately concluded that it must have been bitten by a prehistoric creature that had passed through a wormhole. Then they searched the entire golf course, but found no sign of the wormhole. At this point, Nick noticed some inconsistencies. The entire sky was eerily silent, without a single bird call. It was a bit too quiet. Moreover, the compass was behaving erratically. Then they all looked up at the sky. Just as they looked up, Brown spotted a shadow in the sky, and it was getting larger. At this moment, Connor arrived with a dragon. He was being targeted by a pterosaur. Connor was unaware of this, until the dragon looked back at him in terror. Man and dragon hurriedly ran away. Just as they were about to be caught, Tina quickly ordered the soldiers to shoot. However, Nick felt they still didn't understand what the creature was, and couldn't shoot recklessly. He bumped into a soldier, causing him to miss the last opportunity to shoot, and Connor managed to escape by lying down at the last moment before being caught. The group then returned to their residence. They tracked the pterosaur's location using satellites. It was hiding on the rooftop of a building, resting, so they prepared to capture the pterosaur with tranquilizer guns. However, before they could fire, the creature sensed them. It took to the sky. Nick quickly instructed Tina to take off her red shirt. He wanted to use it as a noticeable red flag to attract the pterosaur's attention. Tina felt very reluctant but prepared to take off her shirt. At this moment, Brown stepped forward and said he had a red undershirt. Soon, the red flag was ready. Sure enough, the pterosaur swooped down upon seeing the red. Brown quickly fired his gun. However, he missed every shot, so he decided to wait for the pterosaur to fly closer before firing. Eventually, he successfully knocked it out. However, it frightened Tina quite a bit. She began to scold the two of them. Suddenly, the pterosaur knocked her out. When Tina woke up again, she realized she was on oxygen, and she had just dreamed of a pterosaur rushing towards her. In a panic, she accidentally stepped on a blood bag, and she had temporarily lost her vision due to a concussion. Nick carefully examined her. The two even developed a hint of affection for each other. Amy and Connor were searching the forest for the missing dragon. However, when they found it, the dragon trembled in fear, looking at Connor's back. When they turned around, they saw countless pterosaurs. Although they were small, they were the most brutal predators. They had 2 rows of extremely sharp teeth and incredible speed. Moreover, they were social creatures. However, they would only attack if they smelled blood. So the two managed to escape this time. But at the same time, they had found a new target. The medic carrying the blood bag was completely devoured. Nick heard the noise and closed all the doors and windows. But the fragile glass couldn't withstand their assault. Tina accidentally fell down. The blood on the ground splattered all over her. Nick quickly took Tina and ran away. He was also covered in bloodstains. The two wanted to quickly take off the bloody jackets. However, the smell of blood on them couldn't be removed. Nick could only rush to the ambulance to search for rescue. The smell of blood attracted countless pterosaurs. In an instant, they trapped him inside the vehicle. Meanwhile, Tina in the room wasn't faring any better. The pterosaur entered the room through the chimney. Having just regained some vision, she could only grab a golf club to fight back. More pterosaurs chose to fly into the house. Nick quickly grabbed a flamethrower, firing as he retreated. However, Tina's situation was precarious. At a critical moment, Helen suddenly appeared. She escaped from the room with Tina, and went to the kitchen to open all the gas valves, then closed all the pterosaurs inside. All the pterosaurs were blown up. After it was all over, Nick examined the droppings of the large pterosaur, and found that it had not eaten any humans. That man had been eaten by the small pterosaurs, so they decided to send it back. The group finally made some progress in their research on wormholes. However, a new threat soon emerged. A wormhole suddenly appeared near the zoo. Unknown creatures invaded the zoo. They tore apart the protective iron bars. Even the mighty king of the savannah couldn't escape unscathed. Amy and Connor rushed to the scene to investigate. Upon receiving the news, they found only some bloodstains on the ground. The lions in the enclosure had already vanished without a trace, and bat blood was found in the blood samples at the scene. Just as everyone was confused, Helen returned from the prehistoric era. She brought bad news. The creature that killed the lions was a future organism. It wasn't only extremely brutal and bloodthirsty, but also moved at an incredible speed. The monster had not actually left the zoo. It had set its sights on Amy. At this time, Brown also learned about the incident with the lions. Worried that Amy was in danger, he rushed to the zoo. Just as he arrived, the monster appeared. The two quickly hid aside and dared not move. Fortunately, Nick arrived with his team in time. the monster escaped from the zoo. The group entered the forest with search dogs to pursue it. However, as soon as they entered, they were attacked by the monster. Its speed was astonishing. It moved even faster in the forest. They couldn't even touch it. In the end, they could only watch it escape. Then the group analyzed the creature's behavior. It was likely a mutant of bats, so it probably used high-frequency sound waves for echolocation. They gathered scanning equipment. However, just as Connor picked up the scanner, it reacted. Fortunately, Brown arrived in time and repelled the monster. Then they discovered a nest of small monsters in a building. The missing people had also been captured there. It seemed they were meant to feed the young. At this moment, the monster noticed them as well. It paced back and forth outside the building. Suddenly, Nick grabbed a monster and ran aside. Then he shot and shattered the ceiling glass, disrupting the creature's echolocation system. Then he found an opportunity to kill it with a single blow. This creature was extremely dangerous. They had to find the wormhole the creature came through, and close it. However, the location of the wormhole couldn't be determined. They could only return to prehistoric Earth for now, but just as they set off, they received news from the lab. After testing, they found that the creature they had just killed was male. At this moment, no one noticed that one creature had slipped into the wormhole. Meanwhile, Helen wanted Nick to take a photo of her, but just as Nick was about to take the shot, he sensed something was wrong. He suddenly remembered that he and the soldier first came to prehistoric Earth right here. Moreover, the items they were carrying this time were the same as those left behind by the skeletons discovered at the time. A sense of foreboding washed over him. Suddenly, the monsters in the box began to scream wildly. Then, the creature that had slipped into the wormhole launched a surprise attack. In an instant, there were heavy casualties. Even the soldier suffered a fatal wound. At a critical moment, a saber-toothed tiger suddenly charged out and engaged the monster. It bit off the creature's right leg. However, although the saber-toothed tiger was large and powerful, the monster was incredibly agile and had sharp claws. It jumped onto the saber-toothed tiger to attack. Although the saber-toothed tiger ultimately triumphed, it was also severely injured. Afterward, Nick buried the soldier's body. The location was exactly where they first discovered the skeletons. Then the two returned to modern society. However, they didn't notice that two monster cubs had not been killed, and Helen didn't want to live in the modern world. After sending Nick out, she returned to prehistoric Earth again. But strangely, everyone was waiting for him to return from the wormhole, but didn't see Tina's figure. Moreover, they all had no recollection of Tina. It seemed that everyone's memories had changed. He suspected that some program must have malfunctioned. The story of the first season concludes here. The film revolves around prehistoric creatures. The theme was relatively novel for that time. Each episode was an independent short story. The main actors' performances were quite good. The revelation of the cliffhanger in the last episode was quite shocking. However, there were many plot holes in the storyline. Many things were left unexplained. It also left suspense for the next season. The special effects looked a bit lacking. After all, it was a film from over a decade ago. Overall, the story was fairly complete, but the special effects and logic were not very strong. I wouldn't recommend watching the original film. If you enjoy my channel, please subscribe to my channel. Your support is the greatest encouragement for me.